We're basically swimming in a sea of messages every single day. From the ads we see to the news we read to our social media feeds, it feels like everything is trying to do one thing: persuade us. But how does that actually work? How do our minds get changed? Well, it turns out there's a really fascinating science behind it all, and it really just boils down to two very, very different ways to get into our heads. Have you ever stopped to think about this? You see one car commercial, and it's all about the engine specs, the horsepower, the miles per gallon. And then the very next ad is for another car, and it's just a famous actor, looking cool, driving down a beautiful coastline. What is going on there? Is one of them doing it wrong? The answer is nope. They're both doing it right. They're just playing two completely different games, targeting two totally different pathways in our brain. On one side, you've got that logical pitch. It's designed to make you really think. And on the other, you've got the vibe, and that's all about making you feel something. Understanding when and why each of these is used, well, that's the key to cracking the code of modern persuasion. To really get this, we've got to take a little trip back in time. In the early days of mass media, we're talking the 1920s, the 30s, the big idea was something called the direct effects model. Researchers honestly believed that media messages were like magic bullets, that they could just inject ideas straight into the public's mind, and people were basically powerless to resist. I mean, listen to this quote. It perfectly captures that early belief, right? This idea of the audience as just passive sponges, helpless victims completely at the mercy of some powerful propagandist on the radio. Early thinkers, they saw things like the rise of Hitler or the huge panic after the War of the Worlds broadcast, and they just figured, wow, the media must be all-powerful. But then researchers started doing, actual rigorous studies, and they found that this whole magic bullet idea, it was pretty much a myth. They looked at presidential campaigns, for example, and found that the media didn't really change people's minds all that much. What it mostly did was just reinforce what people already believed. And that led to a whole new, more realistic view called the limited effects model. So you can see the evolution of thinking right here. We went from that super simple magic bullet theory to the more complicated limited effects idea. But the real breakthrough, the biggest leap forward, came in the 1980s with a model that finally explained why media effects were so all over the place. The secret, it turned out, wasn't just in the message, it was in us, the audience. This was the absolute game changer. Researchers suddenly realized that people aren't just passive buckets waiting for information to be poured in. We're active. We are constantly participating. We talk back to the TV in our hands, right? We argue with articles we're reading. We connect new ideas to our own lives. And what we are thinking while we get a message is way more important than the message itself. This idea is called the cognitive response approach. The key insight here is that persuasion isn't about just learning the facts in an ad. It's about whether that ad sparks positive thoughts in your mind. So if you see an ad for a new phone and you think, wow, that camera sounds incredible, you're creating favorable thoughts, and boom, you're being persuaded. But if you think, my current phone already does that, you're creating unfavorable thoughts, and that ad is totally failing. Okay, this is a great theory, but it immediately brings up a huge question, right? What about the hundreds of messages we see every single day when we're distracted or we're tired or we just flat out don't care? I mean, we can't be deeply analyzing every single banner ad and radio jingle. So what happens then? And that brings us to the main event, the elaboration likelihood model, or ELM for short. Now, that word elaboration just means how likely you are to think about or elaborate on a message. This model, developed by Richard Petty and John Cacioppo, is so brilliant because it solves the puzzle by showing that our brains have two different routes for persuasion, depending on how much we're willing or able to think at any given moment. So think of it like a fork in the road in your mind. The central route is the high-effort path. This is where your brain is firing on all cylinders, actively analyzing arguments and weighing evidence. The peripheral route, on the other hand, is the low-effort shortcut. This is where you rely on simple cues to make a quick judgment without really thinking about it. Let's dig into that central route first. This is your thinking brain in high gear. When a message goes down this path, you are doing some serious cognitive heavy lifting. You're questioning the message, you're comparing it to what you already know, and you're deciding if the arguments actually make sense. And here, the quality of the argument is absolutely everything. By contrast, the peripheral route is your brain's efficiency mode. It's autopilot. When you're not motivated or you're just not able to think deeply, you lean on simple clues. Is the person talking good looking? Do they sound like an expert? Do a lot of other people seem to agree? It's these surface level features, not the argument itself, that end up swaying you. So, what's the decider? What flips the switch and sends a message down one route instead of the other? Well, the ELM says it all comes down to two really simple factors: your motivation and your ability. These two things are like a gatekeeper for your mind. Our brain, in a split second, asks two questions. First, am I motivated? Do I even want to think about this? Is this relevant to my life right now? And second, am I able to think about it? Am I too distracted? Do I have the energy? Is the message just way too complicated? Only when the answer to both of those questions is a big yes do we take that effortful central route. If not, we automatically default to the easier peripheral path. And look, this isn't just a cool theory. It's been tested over and over. In one of the landmark studies, researchers got a bunch of college students and gave them a message about a new exam policy. For half the students, they were told the policy would affect them directly, like that year. For the other half, they were told it would happen at some other university, years after they'd already graduated. And the results were just crystal clear. When the topic was personally relevant, when it mattered to them, the quality of the argument was everything. Strong arguments were super persuasive, and weak ones just completely fell flat. But for the students who thought it wasn't relevant to them, the argument quality barely mattered at all. They just weren't thinking hard enough to even tell the difference. Okay, so we've got two different routes, and they both can lead to persuasion. So who cares which path our brain takes? Well, it matters. It matters a ton because the kind of attitude change you get from each route is fundamentally different. They are not created equal. Check this out. An attitude change that happens through that central route, the thinking route, is strong, it's durable, it lasts a long time, it actually predicts how you'll behave, and it's tough to change because you've really thought it through. But an attitude change from the peripheral route, it's fragile, it's temporary, it's a terrible predictor of your behavior, and it can be wiped out by the very next catchy slogan or celebrity you see. So here's the bottom line. We have come a very long way from that old magic bullet myth. Persuasion is a really sophisticated process. The best communicators know this. They know if they have your full attention, they better bring strong arguments for your thinking brain. But if they know you're probably distracted or just not that interested, they'll use those peripheral cues, humor, cool music, attractive people, to appeal to your shortcut-loving brain and win you over, even if it's just for a little while. And that leaves us with a final thought. Now that you know the playbook, start looking for it. That political ad on TV, is it trying to make you think or just trying to make you feel something? That product review you're watching, is it based on hard data or just the charisma of the person talking? Once you see the playbook, I promise you will never look at the world of persuasion the same way again.